paid back the money until the money was paid. Outsourcing must fall is one example again where people exercise social accountability. And these are spontaneous social accountability exercises, and they are ad hoc examples of social accountability in South Africa. And why do we need social accountability? It's democracy must work. If democracy doesn't work, nobody wants it. Because we all need things that work. When something doesn't add value to your life, you want to trade it for something else. So accountability is one of the key ways to make democracy work. But the other reason we need social accountability is you need democracy to work for all. That's a slogan for the Tuma Foundation, by the way. So democracy must not just work, it must work for all. And that's why Western democracies are in trouble at the moment, because their approach was our democracy works. It's only those African countries and Asian countries and Southern American countries that are having a struggle with democracy because their democracies don't work. But even if it works, if it doesn't work for all, it is going to be in trouble. So democracy must work, and democracy must work for all. And social accountability becomes the closing of that loop. When all of these other things have played their part, but still democracy is not working, is not functioning as it should, and is not working for everyone, social accountability comes in. You will recall that when I started, I spoke about what are some of the areas that are reason for democracy to be in trouble. I said it's for social injustice, public service delivery, corruption, and just the level of democracy literacy and participation in civil society. So social accountability can correct that. And some of the case studies you can look, just to save time, I would suggest that you look at the World Bank website. They have a lot of examples of social accountability that has worked. In South Africa, so far, I've given you examples of sporadic social accountability initiatives. There are more organized social accountability initiatives, and one of the lasting ones here in South Africa is the social accountability initiative of equal education. So your social accountability initiative, you can operate two ways. One is you use the institutional mechanism of the state to correct problems or a malfunction within the state. The second part is you can also operate directly, and that's where you then protest, you use petitions, and you mobilize others to work with you, including the media. And Equal Education has done that. When there was education books not delivered on time, they went to the Department of Education, please correct this. They worked with the schools to count books, to monitor if books had been delivered. And then they asked the Minister of Education to sort out the problem. When the Minister of Education wouldn't sort out the problem, they went to Parliament. And when the Parliament wouldn't sort out the problem, they involved the media. When that didn't work, they went to court. And whilst that was working, they also mobilized civil society in protest. The case study with Equal Education shows that social accountability, for it to work, it doesn't always have to be punitive or adversarial. Because the first part of social accountability is people monitoring what should be happening, where should it be happening, and then just pulling that information and bringing it to the decision makers. You'll see examples in Kenya, Ghana, and in Bangladesh, where people take cell phones of what's going on. let's say, for example, teachers are supposed to be in class and teachers are not in class. So you take pictures of a class where children are playing all by themselves at the wrong time of the day, you send it to the authorities. So no protest, no screaming at each other, you just alert the authorities to the fact that this is what should be happening, there's a discrepancy between what's happening and what should be happening, and you give them an opportunity. So you operate as their eyes and ears. You don't have to be their enemy because they might not be aware of what's going wrong. And of course, if there's no listening, we talk about whispering truth to power. When there's no listening, that's when then we move to the next level. What are the conditions under which social accountability works better? It's when there's democracy, literacy, and leadership. Because people need to know what's happening, what should be happening, before they can complain about the gap between what's happening and what should be happening. And secondly, they need to know who to complain to. Ndifuna Ulwazi is an example of something similar to India, where they're teaching people, Ndifuna Ukwazi, they're teaching people to know where to go, who's responsible for what services, and how should those services be delivered, and therefore they can go to the right person about the discrepancy between the service that should be delivered and the action that should be taken. And the service delivery here is not just delivery of water, it's also regulation. If traffic officers are not doing what they're supposed to do, or they're asking for bribes, you know what they're not supposed to ask for bribes, and you can take this up with the right authorities. We've seen here, for example, Corruption Watch doing that, and getting people to monitor what's happening in the traffic space and in spaces such as Home Affairs, ID, delivery, and licensing departments, that people should use that information and send it to the right places. Transparency. So one is the democracy, literacy, and leadership. The second one is transparency. Americans say sunshine is the best medicine. So where there's transparency, it's easier to exercise social accountability because you can find out what's happening. In South Africa, we have a PIA, which is Promotion of Access to Information Act. Most countries call it an Open Democracy Act. But basically, it helps to have that act because that act empowers you to ask firstly for information. I remember when we did the Ngandla investigation, where the president's house had been bought by sums of money that were close to $250 million. One of our newspapers, the City Press, used PIA to get all of the information relating to Ngandla, 1,200 documents, and then it put them in a public platform where anyone, you and me, could access those documents, and me and you could know the truth about what really happened. So when people were arguing about they being victimized unfairly, the public could exercise social accountability because there was access to information in that portal that the City Press and Amabungane had created. You need a functional and overall accountability framework. Social accountability is about me and you holding public representatives accountable. Me as an individual, me and you acting individually or together. For that to happen, you have to have a system where you can't disappear just because you asked questions. And that happens when you have a functional overall accountability framework. For example, somebody asked questions about whether or not it was true that President Zuma was meeting with some people to plot to remove the current president. So a journalist asked that question. And somebody sent her a photograph of a gun. And so the rest of the system works because the moment she then put that information on Twitter. And as soon as she put that on Twitter, SANEF, which is the South African National Editors Forum, issued a statement to say this is wrong. So this could then be taken up with the politicians, it could be taken up with the courts if need be, but the whole system should support each other. There should be some kind of complementarity within the system. Otherwise you disappear, like the journalist in Uganda, the former MP, well, he hasn't disappeared, but you go to jail for exercising social accountability. And so it helps when the rest of the system, technological developments. One of the greatest advances that we have today that are enhancing social accountability is technology. In fact, technology is taking us back to the village. It's creating a global village, because in the village, everyone knew what was happening. It was a small place where we know each other, we know what you did last night, and we could hold you accountable, and democracy was exercised under the tree. By having society grow so big, we grew in distance and we couldn't hold each other accountable, and social media is bringing us back to that space where we know who's doing what. Yes, of course, we get fake media, and I've been a victim of that, people calling me a spy and even creating fake spy IDs for me from the CIA. But I would say, despite its dangers, the social media is good, because you can also call people to order through social media. In my case, for example, it was nice that they did this on social media, because people could see, oh, the picture, how come if you have been a spy for the rest of your life, how come the picture the spy agency is using is the public protector profile picture? For all these years, they had their own cameras. And the other picture they had was also from You magazine, with even borrowed earrings from the magazine, which I could have only had for that day. So, but again, it helps, because if it's in the media, sunshine is the best medicine, because it allows you to be able to evaluate fake news from real news. Technological development, but technological development is also going to be able, beyond just the general monitoring. Technological development is also going to help us with social accountability in terms of being able to honestly measure the extent of service delivery. I am hoping, for example, that our young technological design students will help us to design better services, not just come in at the end when you're evaluating services. When government come up with policy, you can use your technology to evaluate, through using algorithms, how that new policy is likely to impact on everyone, how that policy is likely to reduce poverty and inequality or expand poverty and equality. And that's something that our mathematical scientists are going to help us. Social accountability works better when you have a mature and purpose-driven leadership in government. I mean, if you have presidents like a president of one country that I'm not going to mention, that is very averse to criticism, social accountability becomes a career-limiting initiative if you're in business, for example, because the moment you criticize the people in government, they look at you and say you criticize, and then they look at withdrawing, I mean, I was reading about that country this morning, for example, that they're withdrawing support to the ICC because the ICC wants to investigate whether or not there were excesses in Afghanistan. They want to withdraw an embassy for the Palestinian Authority because the Palestinian Authority demands parity of esteem in terms of how that country treats the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli Authority. So you need mature leaders on the steering wheel who are not going to take a criticism as an insult. You need an incentive structure. It helps to have an incentive structure for those in government, because often when we think about social accountability, we think about how do we find the corrupt and jail them, which is fine. But we have an initiative on social accountability that started, I think, in Bangladesh, which is about finding an integrity idol. So they look for people in government. This time, they're not looking for the wrongdoers. They're looking for the do-gooders. and they profile them to show people it can be done, and then they have some kind of reward that is given to an integrity idol. So that's social accountability again, finding the ones who are doing what they're supposed to do, and profiling them and giving them incentives as one way of doing things. Partnerships with government, there are many examples where partnerships work more than the adversarial approach. But it doesn't mean, of course, that you stay with the partnership, because if you stay too much with the partnership, you yourself can be captured, where you're no longer able to say your truth because you're worried about losing the incentive of being an insider. So you have to be careful about being part of the system, but keep your identity and keep your independence. And it's all about really staying focused. It's still all about you being ethical, staying purpose driven, aware of your own impact, and having a clear commitment to serve the community that you're trying to serve. But in ending, dear colleagues, in our country, and as may be the case in your own countries, democracy is under strain. On the 15th of this month, we will be commemorating International Democracy Day. Your event is accordingly timely, because it's an opportunity to reflect on how can we use social accountability to deepen democracy, to re-anchor democracy, to strengthen democracy, even if it means reimagining democracy for its own sake. So the future is bright, given the many opportunities for strengthening democracy through social accountability. Ultimately, social accountability is about re-anchoring democracy in the people, the demos, because democracy is made out of two Greek words, demos and kratos. Demos is the people, kratos is power. And increasingly, the power has shifted to the public representatives and away from the people. So through social accountability, you're trying to find ways to re-anchor democracy in the people in order to save democracy from itself. How do we save democracy? By making sure that democracy works effectively. In other words, democracy must work in order to continue. And democracy must work for all. And if democracy works and works for all, it can solve the problems that I have identified that are at the core of democracy in trouble, being social justice, integrity, and a public service that delivers on its mandate. Thank you. Enjoy your conference.
Thank you very much, Prof. Madonsela. I think you'd agree with me that that was certainly an inspiring speech, and I think we learned a lot, even for those of us who've been social accountability practitioners for years, some perhaps in the room for decades. And I think one of the key take-home messages for me there is also the ability to think outside of what we understand to be democracy, and to craft a way forward together, and in particular what the 3 C's, I think I reflected on them as being the 3 C's, what they mean in terms of threats to democracy. So this notion of corruption, clientelism, and capture, and the kind of fundamental ways in which we can work around those. I was particularly excited to hear about the Chinese imbongi, and I think a lot of the people in this space do exactly that in their various organizations and in the countries in which they work, is to highlight the things that aren't working as they should, in a way that is in itself full of integrity and conviction. So I think all in all, that was for me a fantastic opportunity to kind of reflect on the work we do. And thank you for taking us through the various countries as well. I think that was great. So what we're going to do now is to open up the floor for questions. I'm sure there are many brimming questions and across the room. We have a roving mic, so if you could indicate if you'd like to have a question answered. I'm going to try and detach this mic without causing distraction, and I think Prof can answer from where she sits. So we'll go around the room, open up the floor. Sia has a mic at the back. Let's take the first 4 questions, one after the other, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, so we'll start at the back. There's a person in red, and right next to you, Sia, number 2, number 3 in the second row. Let's hold it there for now.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lucky Mena from Corruption Watch. Thank you so much. Okay. I'm just interested in this topic, but when you were making your contribution, I kept on thinking about the state capture commission that is going on now, which you really played a role in being where we are as a country. I think for me, working in the anti-corruption sector, what I always say is that people in the country have really lost trust on systems and on government. And most people are like going on saying, this commission looks good, but then what? Because we are not seeing anyone being punished, and we have seen the commission set after the Marikana massacre. We have seen the life is demanding. No one is being held accountable after that. And I just want to pick your mind around that, because I have an idea. Is it possible to have a commission going on? While the commission is going on, we had a very track-focused forensic and prosecutorial process going on parallel to the commission. Because I believe, I've got a reason to believe that if we can start looking at it that way, where we see people being punished, people being held accountable, we might do away with the culture that we have on the ground, where people are saying it's just a waste of time, it's just a waste of money, and we know that role politics play in commissions. When they get politicized, they get prolonged indefinitely. By the time this commission will be done, we have forgotten in another new board and forgotten about. I just want to find out, is that possible to actually punish people while the commission is going on?
Right. Was I supposed to do that? So, okay, thank you. Hello? 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 Hello?
Oh, it's for the camera, but can everyone else?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, we didn't actually explain that.
It's okay. Well, thank you for that question to my colleague from Corruption Watch. Right. Should we have a forensic process? Well, the first thing you said is that we have a trust deficit, and I think that's the missing link in my presentation. There were 2 slides that I somehow jumped. The one was another reason democracy is in trouble is economic stagnation. Because for a democracy to thrive, people should prosper. And we talk about shared prosperity, but that means shared and prosperity. So social justice in the context of no food, sharing no food among ourselves, is not very helpful. So that was one slide. The other slide was the final slide, was that with all of these things working against us, we have a huge trust deficit in society. A trust deficit between the people and public representatives, between the people and public institutions, between the people and even the notion of democracy. A lot of people came across us when we were at the Pub Protector event, when we were at the first event of the Turma Foundation, people were saying, we don't want democracy, we ask for freedom, we want our freedom back. So it's all lack of trust on these concepts, on these institutions, because these institutions and concepts are not translating to an improvement in lived out experiences of people. They're not translating to everyone enjoying all human rights, the ones that are promised in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, African Charter of Human and People's Rights, and our own constitutions in our country. And of course, that trust translates into lack of trust in public institutions, including institutions such as commissions of inquiry. The reality is the Commission of Inquiry does have a forensic unit. So we only see what's happening on the ground, what is happening in the public spectacle, but in the background, they are doing forensic investigations, as they should, because they were given all of the powers of the Pub Protector when it comes to investigations. But you're saying, as the Commission moves, should there be other investigations? They are. The Hawks are investigating. The police are investigating. The Pub Protector is investigating some cases that it has been investigating since my time. For example, the whole question of the New Age issue and the dairy farm thing. It's under the Pub Protector. So the various institutions, which is a good thing about South Africa's machinery, is you can capture one institution, but you can't capture all. But in the age of capture, in the age of corruption, in the age of clientelism, that's where you need social accountability, because you need people to know how much do we have as part of our democracy stake, and how is that divided among all communities, and we come here. But on the issue of corruption, there are parallel investigations that are taking place. Have faith though in the Commission. I genuinely believe that the wrongdoers will be brought to book. My only concern is we won't get the money back. But it's not the fault of the Commission, it's the fault of the government, because it took forever to move. Those of you who are involved in policing, they say the first rule when you are policing is site control, to control the crime scene. Have you seen when somebody's dead, they immediately put those markers, those stickers, tapes to say no one else should go in there. The same thing when you investigate corruption, the first thing you're supposed to do is to move in there, collect the documents. You'll ask questions later. And collect bank statements, collect cell phone records, do triangulation of people's movements. But all of that now may be lost because of the time that has been lost.
And I wanted to just clarify whether I'm understanding that point clearly, because we know that in this country, the wealth and capital concentration still remains largely a particular race group. And access to that wealth and capital also means that we have control of the market and often create barriers to entry for small enterprises, small businesses. trying to penetrate the market. So I just wanted to understand whether what you're saying is that the concept of white monopoly capital hadn't come into the public discourse before the campaign, or if what you're saying is that if you wouldn't term that phenomenon white monopoly capital, then what would you call it? And then the second point is around reimagining democracy. Recently, I just came back from the Rethinking Economics for Africa festival, and one of the takeaways was that we're drivers of our narrative and the systems that we're in. In that light, one of the panelists was speaking about the well-known saying that don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, but had a spin on it, and rather saying that often the saying is interpreted as that if you throw out the baby with the bathwater, you are throwing away some good qualities and trying to save a system that's been there, but rather that we should be throwing out the baby because often the baby, which is something that represents long-standing sort of concepts and aspects of a theory or a process that have been benefiting particular people, and rather the water, which has been the issue that's been disrupting or challenging the solution, should be the thing that we keep and we try to work with. And I was wondering, from your perspective, what would you say is the bathwater for democracy? Because we found that there are aspects of our democracy that really benefit some people, and we don't all get to enjoy citizenship in this country in the same way. So what are some of the key areas of disrupting democracy that you would say are the aspects that we need to be looking into the system?
Thank you. Oh, should I? Okay, let me just answer those two questions. Thank you for those questions. You're from education, equal education, you said, yes. The first question, the colleague from equal education, was about state capture. Am I rejecting the concept, or am I rejecting the campaign? I'm rejecting the campaign because the campaign was a dead cat. A dead cat is dead anyway, so there's something wrong with the dead cat. But when you bring a dead cat, when people are on the table discussing something important, and because you want to distract them from what's on the table, then we might be concerned about the dead cat at a different space. But the dead cat strategy is not meant to really start a serious conversation about the dead cat. A dead cat strategy is a strategy. It's a form of disruption, but of disruption of an important conversation so that people lose sight of what they were talking. And what happened here is, as soon as Public Protector of South Africa started the investigation on state capture in March last year, Andy Limgwitama from Black First, Land First, started saying the problem is not the Guptas, which you now know that the problem was the Guptas. The problem is not the Guptas, the problem is white monopoly capital. He camped at my office, disrupted my office, and threatened my staff and said, you either stop this investigation or you investigate white monopoly capital from the arrival of white people in this country and through all sorts of things, and lied to the nation about me having not investigated the APSA, which APSA investigation I had rejected, by the way. And the complainant, Paul Hoffman, found me in Spain and said, please reconsider. This is low-lying fruit, and based on Paul asking me and promising me that it was low-lying fruit, I investigated, I completed it. No other investigation was done beyond the one I did. It was a difference of different conclusions being reached by my successor versus the conclusion I reached. Within my book, I will explain, actually, I think this matter would have gone better for the people had my conclusion continued, but that's not the story. The whole issue of white monopoly capital, firstly, the problem is not white monopoly capital. The problem is monopoly capital. The world is dysfunctional today because there's a disjuncture between democracy and monopoly capital. But after the fall of communism, we failed to rein in capitalism, because democracies were able to rein in capitalism at some stage because there was a real threat of communism. And as soon as the Iron Curtain fell and the Berlin Wall fell, there was nothing to leverage against. And today, a capitalist society is always a pyramid of some sort. The people at the bottom feed the top. But now we have not a pyramid. You know how a pyramid is shaped. It's sort of fattish in the middle and, of course, bulky. Now you have, somebody has to still tell us, because it's something so tiny now where even the middle class has been whittled down and the rich have become obscenely rich. And it doesn't matter whether they're black or white, it is wrong. Should you equalize fortunes in society, whether rich or poor? Yes, we should. But that conversation is not going to happen at the level of a white monopoly capital campaign. Not even a question of expropriate land without compensation. That's still another dead cat, because you're promising everyone who's poor that if we expropriate a few farms under restrained conditions from farmers, your life is going to be improved. When there's 75% ownership of land by whites in the urban areas, 72% ownership of land by whites in the rural areas, 1.2% land ownership in urban areas by black Africans, 7% ownership of land by black Africans, 7% in urban, 1.2% in rural areas. The narrow approach, the extremist approaches are never meant to solve the problem. They are about exploiting divisions in society. But also, my dear colleagues, I did say the fissures were there because we have failed to advance social justice in our society. And social injustice is like a debt. Any of you who have been involved in debt, if in paying your debt you pay little amounts, the debt doesn't go down. If anything, the capital debt grows exponentially in such a way that eventually it will be too big. And that's what has happened with social injustice in South Africa. It's not that we haven't made efforts to try and reduce inequality and poverty. We've made insignificant changes to the problem. And then the capital debt has then leveraged itself to grow exponentially. And if we don't change course, trust me, we're in for a high jump here in South Africa and in the rest of the continent if we don't make significant changes on inequality and poverty. And the UN already knows that. That's why we have sustainable development goals. That if we don't change the course we're going into, democracy is in crisis and peace is going up in smoke with democracy. And the second question dear colleague asked was
baby and the bathwater.
Oh yeah, the baby and the bathwater in democracy. That's a wonderful question around do we throw away democracy? And I'm glad you asked this question, because in case I've been misunderstood, my approach has not been throw it away, because I think that we will always need a system where all of us have a say. How we articulate what is the best mechanism to get all of us to have a say has changed over time. And that's why I gave examples of Athenian democracy. When I gave a lecture actually on Athenian democracy at UNISA, they reminded me that whatever Athens did, they studied it from Africa. A lot of it they found happening in Ethiopia and other parts of Northern Africa. So yes, in terms of, I don't particularly like the concept of the baby in the bathwater in this particular kind of analogy. Because when we say throwing away the baby with the bathwater, it's normally because we say the water is dirty and the baby is clean. So in this case, I think what has been poisoned actually is our baby, which is democracy, whatever you want to call it, but a system where every member of a collective has a say on the affairs of that collective, the future of that collective, the resources of that collective. And how do we want to articulate it? My call to young people is stop regurgitating Fanon. Stop regurgitating Marx. Stop, in the Western world, stop regurgitating Dicey and all of this, Plato, Aristotle, etc. They did great because they studied the challenges of their time. Ours is to borrow their concept and look at what do we invent for our time. So in other words, I'm not saying throw away Aristotle, throw away Fanon, throw away Amilcar Cabral. I am saying look at what they came up with, Marx. Look at what they came up with in studying the world. Because they didn't have the information of how the world has changed dramatically in our time. Let's have our own new Marxes, our own new Fanons. Let's have new African philosophers that will quote, who are talking about their time. If you think about Machiavelli, I like about Machiavelli because he was a civil servant. He was talking about rethinking democracy as he was implementing the system he was part of. We should do the same.
Second row. Maybe up to you.
My name is, can you hear me? My name is Lillian Matsika. I'm coming from Zimbabwe. And from an organization called Diakoni. What we have been implementing programs of social accountability, but the challenge that we have seen even at the community level is a polarized society, in which even at choosing community representatives, people choose according to political alliance. Even as they want to demand accountability, maybe from a local authority, those who are in line with the councillors of a certain party, they will not interrogate. And those who are on the opposite side, they are just saying that they are opposing because they are in opposition. And you also find even the officials themselves have been polarized to some extent. And in such an environment, when there's also a shrinking political space, it has been very difficult in implementing proper social accountability. So my question is just, how do you operate in such an environment where you find the society is polarized from the grassroots to the executives? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lillian Matsika. A polarized society is one of the impediments, of course, to both a functional democracy and effective social accountability. You can get a limited amount of social accountability, but you can't bring everyone on board. We have the same problem here of social of a polarized society. I suspect in your case the society may be polarized because of tribalism, of sometimes our political leaders appeal to tribal affiliations to divide and conquer. In South Africa, it's racism. Our political leaders appeal to racial cleavages to divide and conquer. And some of them will even exploit tribal cleavages, age cleavages, and even gender cleavages to divide and conquer. But ultimately, it is those three C's that are the core of polarization It is a certain level of corruption. Clientelism is one of the best ways politicians use to create and exploit cleavages. In that, what's going to happen, and I'm sad that it's virtually every political party in South Africa, because I've now lived in 2 provinces, that politicians tend to service better communities that vote for them. That's clientelism, because you're not supposed to send services to the community based on who voted for you and who's likely to vote for you. Services are not a reward for voting for politicians. Once a politician has been elected, they owe a duty to every citizen and person in the country, even a non-citizen, because every taxpayer, and the truth is everyone pays tax. It's often said the poor don't pay tax. They pay VAT, they pay fuel levies and things like that. Everyone pays tax and everyone deserves to be served, but they do exploit that. So the question is, and then capture. The capture is also another way society is divided, because a few elites find their way to capture a niche of the state, and then they do things together. That creates cleavages in society again, because people can see the disparities, they can see the unfairness in the way things are done. Civil society itself is divided by not just the shrinking political space, it's also divided by the feeling that there aren't enough resources for us. So it becomes a highly competitive environment where I work at the university and I would ask somebody who is involved in social justice. I know so and so, this group is supposed to be doing good work. Often you get people in the social justice space who say, no, rubbish in each other. No, that one is not doing right. Because it's all about looking at, there isn't enough, there's a poverty mentality, there isn't enough space for all of us. If I rubbish this group, then I will get into the party. And then the question is, despite all of this, how can we work together to organize social accountability? I would say, for me, initially choose the social accountability space that is not adversarial, where it's really about there's a municipality and you need to be the eyes and ears of those who are dispensing funds with the hope that those funds are going to service to the people. And you set yourself up as a group that will monitor the extent to which there's a match between the communicated intentions, the communicated amounts, and the actual delivery. In South Africa, the other space for social accountability is IDPs, integrated development plans at municipalities. The World Bank's emphasis on social accountability is working with government to plan more effectively so it's sort of fiscal discipline and fiscal competence. So you can come into that space again with information around where are the needs in society and where should the money go to, and then monitoring whether at the level of delivery things are going to the right place. I don't think ultimately any government wants to pay, for example, as happened in this country in the Northwest one day, where government released funds, 400 million for an RDP settlement, and ultimately the payment was only for one house, the show house. So by leveraging your eyes and ears, or the community eyes and ears, to see what's happening on the ground, you're actually helping government, because often they really don't know what's happening. I remember Premier Mahafule, whatever his sins may be on a different planet, on the real level of local government, he was so shocked that the books were showing this number of RDP houses built, the people were complaining, and eventually had to dispatch 18 to go there to count. If you had social accountability clusters, he wouldn't have to do that, because he would have heard the communities do this. And in a country like Zimbabwe, often I don't want to get into the politics of whether the new government won fairly or didn't win fairly. The truth is, it is the new government. So what's the space for social accountability is to take everything that the president has done and bring it to the people to know what has the president said. So that's just the training at the stage. It's not rubbishing him. It's just saying, what is the promise? And that becomes an area of work. And then strike a deal about monitoring whether the people he relies on to deliver on the ground are actually answering the call. And then also to have conferences like this at the level of the different places to talk about social accountability so that people can understand that actually one candle is powerful against the dark because light is stronger than darkness. But many candles together are formidable against the dark. And working together is like Ethiopians say, when spider webs combine, they can even tie up a lion. So we can do the same as civil society. On social justice, we're just doing the same now. At Stellenbosch University, we have a project called an M-Plan for Social Justice. It's really doing what we were supposed to have done. In Zimbabwe, actually, you should do yours now, your M-Plan. It's a recovery plan that's looking at how do you make everyone's life better. Because nobody is going to want to be part of a family if membership of that family means pain for them and happiness for the rest of the family. So an M-Plan for social justice is about looking at civil society, that even though society is impoverished, there are degrees of impoverishment. How does civil society now bring whatever little they have to reduce inequality and to reduce poverty in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. The goal is, in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, is no extreme poverty by 2030. In South Africa, the National Development Plan says no poverty by 2030. So we can sit there and complain that we're not feeling the NDP on the ground. Or we can do, as Stellenbosch and the Tuma Foundation are doing, go to the ground and make them feel the NDP by helping them to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and then look for social investment partners to meet them halfway. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So that was the first round. I'm mindful of our time and I'd like to ask for the next round of questions to be as succinct as we possibly can make them. I've noted, CC has already given the mic to someone at the back. There's a person at the back next to Sia. There was another hand here. Is your question, you still like to, okay, so we'll go from there to this row here. Number 3 at the front row here. Okay, so we've got 3 questions, one after the other, but perhaps we'll do the same format as before.
Thank you very much for a brilliant presentation. My name is John Makambole from Zimbabwe. I work for an organization called the Southern African Parliamentary Support Trust. I'll try to be precise. You talked about the traditional forms of enforcing accountability. Where, for example, we engage policymakers, we do research, provide evidence-based research, with recommendations, conclusions, but there is perception. The public perception is that the institutions that we are targeting don't deliver, they are captured. So that's public perception. Right? So generally there is inertia. There is no willingness by the public to engage policymakers. I've seen it in many countries that I've worked in, where you try to mobilize citizen participation and engagement of policymakers. But there is some kind of resistance. You know, the public is tired. The public doesn't believe that policymakers will make a difference. Right. And so then you spoke about the other form of enforcing accountability, which you sort of like implied that it is the last resort. You gave examples of fees must fall, pay back the money. That can happen in an environment that is tolerant. In an environment where the duty bearers are not tolerant, there is heavy clampdown on such forms of exacting accountability. So just shoot about 2-3 people, then no one is prepared to engage in that kind of way of enforcing accountability. So I just wanted to shed a bit of light. It's related to what my colleague I think said earlier on. Shed a bit of light how you can try to maneuver that difficult situation. Thank you.
Are you happy to take the next talk?
Yes.
Thank you and good morning all. My name is Barwani Mshale from Twaweza, East Africa in Tanzania. My question is about the very galvanizing statement, making democracy work for all. But it's something that I'm grappling with, and maybe we can help each other to clarify, unpack, and see whether it makes sense. Questioning the concept of making democracy work for all. Can democracy work for all? That is one. And two, the all in the statement making democracy work for all, hasn't it become now the mainstream, the man? When we are silent about those who democracy is not working for, isn't it now a disservice that we are not helping them? Why not being bold and aggressive and saying directly, make a democracy work for the women, for the youth, for the poor, etc., for those who are disempowered, marginalized, instead of being silent and capturing them in this broad statement of making democracy work for all.
I think he's just stepped out. So let's just go ahead with the questions we've got.
There's a lady here.
Okay, Sia, there's a...
Okay.
Thanks a lot for the wonderful presentation. My name is Bessie from Malawi. I work for the Center for Empowering Democracy. You define accountability as to say answerability and managing of the consequences. And in order to do that, to arrive at that, you need actually strong and viable institutions that can deliver such kind of results. So in societies that institutions are too weak, like we mentioned about Chapter 9 institutions in the case of your country, and also in my country, there are constitutional institutions that are supposed to exercise oversight. And then there comes a time where those institutions are the ones that are highly corrupt. You look at the judiciary is corrupt, the police is corrupt, and the Human Rights Commission is corrupt. And then you say, okay, and then the citizens, they are too poor and too, they have resigned into their fate that if they rise up against the system, they cannot, they are powerless and they are helpless. In that case, like us, the civil society organizations, how best can we locate the social accountability work in situations like those where constitutional oversight institutions, they are the ones that capture the system, and they are also the ones that are as corrupt as they are.
Which country, sir? Malawi. Right. Thank you, dear colleagues, for all of those questions and kind comments. Perhaps I'll start with the last one because I was a member of an oversight body, and I didn't perceive my colleague in Malawi to be one of the corrupt. In fact, by doing her job, she received such a vicious she had such a vicious attack from the government. I'm just trying to remember what was the name. She was a female retired judge that was the public protector of Malawi, or they call in Malawi an ombudsman. But having said that, the reason we need social accountability is to close the loop. So if those institutions are compromised, either because of clientelism or corruption or kept or being captured, that's where social accountability becomes an important answer. And I think that's how the World Bank has located the social accountability thing. Ideally, you want the whole system to work, to complement. And but it closes the gap where there's a gap. And it even exposes, because you're now out, social accountability is out. And if you have freedom of the media, it becomes a partner in social accountability. But even in the absence of freedom of the mainstream media, even if the mainstream media itself might be captured, you also have social media that allows you to find the information, corroborate the information, find information, share information with others, and flood it. For example, in South Africa, we had some problems with inertia by our police on state capture and corruption. We had inertia by the Hawks. Instead, the Hawks investigated us, the oversight bodies. I had numerous cases lodged by the white monopoly capital activists against me, and literally the Hawks didn't evaluate, is this worth pursuing? It investigated it. A lot of the state capture whistleblowers were investigated, and a docket handed over actually to the NTPA for them to be tried. But it didn't stop you and me from exercising social accountability, sharing information about the truth. And one area where people are leveraging some form of social accountability is co-authoring books about what you know, and flooding the market with the information on what you know. And the good thing about co-authoring is, if somebody wants to attack you, they'll have to attack 5 people that co-authored the book. And obviously then it will be clear that this is motivated by what we've done. Whereas sometimes acting alone is difficult. I would say yes, it's true that these institutions may be captured, but when you have a multiplicity of them, it's more difficult to capture them. But social accountability allows you to hold your public representatives accountable despite some of those institutions being corrupted or captured. It also allows you to expose capture, corruption, or clientelism in some of these public accountability institutions. And then the colleague from Zambia, that's a very interesting question. A lot of the people that are sitting here are my colleagues from the Tilma Foundation. And they are, who's the colleague who's challenging? Oh, it's a colleague here who's challenging Make Democracy Work For. So your colleagues that are sitting here at the front here are from an institution whose slogan is Make Democracy Work For All. And perhaps what you are saying is the debate between, for example, feminism and humanism. I say we need a world that respects humanism, And feminists say we need a world that respects feminism. I say humanism because I'm saying it doesn't matter that you respect women if you still torture old people, or torture children, or torture foreigners on the grounds of xenophobia. You just need a world that embraces the humanity of every human being, hence humanism. And that's the same argument for us, as you must make you make democracy work for all. But in our literature, we talk about the left behind. I think you are saying make democracy work for the left behind. The reality with humanity is you always have to give them what's in it for them. And there's some guy who wrote a poem, They Called Within, where he's talking to the privileged, to say to the privileged, you have an opportunity to end racism. This is America in the 60s. You have an opportunity to end racism. It might not affect you, but in the end it will kill you. So he talks about 6 people who happen to be together at night, and all of them have a lock, but none of them will use it. And in the end, the fire dies because all 6 of them that have a lock in their hand won't use it. The first one won't use it because they see somebody who's not from their church. Another one sees somebody. If a white person sees a black person sees all of these white people. A rich person sees a poor person sees a rich person, and somebody who's just, those mercenary people who never do anything if they're not going to be paid, sees all of these people and think they're not going to pay them. But the nature of humanity is you always have to work out what's in it for them. And in this particular poem, Jane Patrick Kinney makes the point that what's in it for them is keeping the flame of democracy alive, keeping peace alive. That if you allow somebody to suffer, eventually that will catch up with all of us. Because I think it was Martin Luther King who said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I believe as long as there's injustice somewhere, there can't be sustainable peace anywhere. But I don't know, you can frame it either way, but the thing is you need to bring everyone on board. Your message has to say, yes, at the end of the day, it's about making sure that we don't leave anyone behind because it's going to harm us. But if it's not working for them, it's actually not working for you, although it looks like it's working for you. Like the rich at the moment, they're realizing, the Bill Gates and everyone, about it looked like it was working for them, but ultimately it's not working for them. Jack Ma was on TV this morning just talking about that. It's okay to get rich, but at the end of the day, if there's such a vast gap between the rich and the poor, it's a recipe for a very unstable world. And an unstable world is a threat to sustainable economic advancement, even for the rich. Unless they're going to go and eat their money on planet Mars, which is not an immediate prospect. And duty bearers, yes, okay, there was a question about the duty bearers that are not tolerant of criticism. Yes, that is one of the problems of social accountability. It works better when duty bearers are tolerant. That was one of the things that I had mentioned when I was talking about a climate that is fertile for good social accountability. But I must say, speaking to, how many of you are from civil society here? So the majority of us are from civil society. I came from civil society, and we were at this, and in my early years I worked as a trade unionist, and I worked also at a university. I have found that social accountability works better when we give credit when it's deserved. I found that sometimes civil society activists can't just find anything good. I was with some people a while ago. We were just discussing the governing party, and some of them couldn't find a single thing that the current president is doing well. A single thing. The problem is just even if you have a friend, if all you say to your friend is to rubbish them, they cease to take you seriously. They just try to minimize contact with you. Because everyone wants to feel good about themselves. So perhaps, I think it was one American president who invented a method that I use. And it's a method that is called the sandwich method. It's also good for giving feedback to your staff. It's called the sandwich method. You start with, but my team eventually learned what was coming at the potato. I met with a person and I said to them and told them everything that they're doing well. And then the next layer is, hey, Maharaman. It really would be nice if we were to improve this. And then you end again with something remarkable that they do. Because it's about confidence building. Roosevelt Noskanta has written a whole book about how do you make people perform. Hitting them hard, it doesn't make them perform. And Roosevelt Noskanta studied performing teams in sports, in business, and governments, and found that the high-performing teams is where the kind of feedback is confidence building. So I would say with civil society, it's okay to criticize government, but it shouldn't be criticism for the sake of criticism. It should be, when they're doing something good, you say so. And as Pop Potato, I was an oversight body. When they did something well, I said so. That's why a lot of them supported me. I mean, the average civil servant was 100% behind the Pop Potato South Africa. And even today, they're still behind that. Because the idea was, no, it's not about just saying just because you crossed the river and you became on the other side, you are now evil and corrupt. There's no water that they drink that we don't drink. We drink from the same water. So that's what we might say, dear colleagues, is that. But I'm not justifying. I think there was a colleague who spoke though about countries where a person or two are going to be shot to stop people from articulating their concerns. I think in cases like that, it becomes extremely important to make sure that those incidences are not left alone and international justice is brought to the party. I know, for example, that with Marikana here, there was a commission of inquiry to make sure that people are not just shot randomly just because they're protesting. So Marikana was investigated, and I know Zimbabwe has now asked Motlanthe and the panel to investigate. And I think those kinds of practices that make sure that those cases are investigated and nothing is taken lying down will make sure that force is not used to stop people from protesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'll make a few people sad when I say this, but I'm afraid we will have to end our session there. Very enlightening discussion and certainly a lot of pearls of wisdom. And I think ultimately the notion of keeping the flame of democracy alive by eradicating inequality and injustice is an important one. And the issue of sunshine and sunlight being the best medicine. Certainly we have a lot of candles in this room. I think you mentioned that light is stronger than dark. And I think that's a very special analogy to keep in mind. I think ultimately also it's about the ways in which we can bolster the ecosystem or the social accountability system and its strength. And I think that's precisely one of the lessons that you've brought with you today, which I think is fantastic. Thank you very much. And I think before I do housekeeping, we'd like to just give you a final round of applause and say thank you very much for your time.
The one word is do check the World Bank website, and they're advertising a conference right now on social accountability. I think it's going to take place either at the end of this month or the end of October. And they have a lot of models where a lot of the social accountability is in partnership with chosen public institutions. So it's not them and us all the time. Thank you.
Okay, just to end off, thank you very much. Ending off on some quick housekeeping. So Jay earlier mentioned that we would have breakaway sessions. The session names are on the side over there on the board. So there's 4 breakaways. The spaces are limited, so the quicker you can get to them, the better. And then they're divided into 4 separate sessions. We'll have to take quite a quick tea, I'm afraid, but I'm sure you agree it was worth it, cutting into our tea session. And then we'll break into them. If you'd like to know where each of the sessions are, to be sure, the front desk where you registered will be able to let you know and take you to the right sessions. Okay, enjoy tea, everyone, and see you again in the next plenary. So in fact, the breakaways are after lunch. We have a plenary coming back in here after tea. So see you after tea in here and have a look at the plenaries. Sign up for them at tea time. 11:45.